So today we get to visit with Nancy Dunn. I always enjoy talking to Nancy because she's obviously super intelligent about everything having to do with the Longhorns and, you know, how far she's taken her program. But I just love listening to her talk. She has a great draw.
She does. She's very easy to listen to talk. Along with her Longhorns, I think she's also really well known for her horses as well. I think she's done really well in horse for charities as well as Longhorn for charities.
It seems like a lot of our customers that we're going to be talking with on our podcast, they have backgrounds in various different breeds. So maybe they got into Longhorns first and then progressed into horses or cattle or, you know, another breed of cattle, or maybe vice versa. Maybe they had horses for a long time and then, you know, Longhorns was kind of a natural progression for them. So I always enjoy hearing from folks like this who have multiple perspectives on our questions.
And Nancy also, when we see her at events, she typically has a sidekick. Her and Kathy are known as the cow gals. So if you ever see her, I'm sure Kathy won't be too far behind.
Yes. And I always love Nancy's ads in the magazines too. They're very clever, and I would imagine direct a lot of traffic to her website because they're very comical ads, but they don't have a lot of information. So I think it's very clever on the cow gals to do that.
It is. Should we get started and talk to her?
Yep, let's do it. Hi, I'm Molly.
And I'm Jamie, and this is our From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast. As the owners of Hired Hand website software, we've been developing websites and creating internet marketing strategies for livestock breeders for the past 10 years.
The majority of our customers are involved in the breeding of registered animals, such as Texas Longhorns, Highland cattle, horses, and white-tailed deer, where the pedigrees are very important. The From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast examines many of the differences in raising pedigreed livestock for maximum profit. Join us and learn what we're covering today. In today's episode, we're talking with Nancy Dunn of Rolling D Ranch in Alabama about different weaning techniques. Nancy, tell us a little bit about Rolling D Ranch to get started.
Okay. I have been in the Longhorn business just over 30 years, and I do have a cow-calf type operation and try to really focus on total package cattle and honing in on certain genetics that take me there, but it's a lot of work. I pretty much run the operation by myself, but it's a passion, you know, so I enjoy what I do, even though it's pretty tough sometimes to get everything done in a day's time.
So today we're talking about weaning. What are the different options or styles for weaning?
Well, the ones I'm familiar with are either abrupt weaning, where you just would pull your calves straight out of the pasture with the cows and move them to a removed location without warning, you know, for either. Or oftentimes people use fence line weaning, where they just move the calves on the opposite side of the fence and give the cows and calves an opportunity to get accustomed to being separated. And then there are nose flaps that you can use, such as quiet wean, that you insert in the calf's nose and then actually leave the pair together for a period of time and let them stop nursing but continue to maintain the contact with the mother while that process is going on.
Out of those different styles of weaning, which one do you prefer?
Well, I prefer the quiet wean by far.
What's the reason for that? Like, why do you feel that it's the one that you choose out of those options?
Well, for me personally, there are several reasons. One is the facilities and fencing that I have available work better for the quiet wean because you leave the calf with the cow until they're essentially weaning themselves. And I don't have the facilities or good fencing to sort of keep them separate anyway. And the other thing is because of our weather, and I generally have fall-born calves, which means I'd be weaning when the weather is warming up in the spring. And the weaning process is so stressful on both the cow and the calf that I feel like the quiet wean gradually weans them while they still maintain the bond with their mother, reduces the stress greatly, chance for disease, pneumonia, diarrhea. You don't hear a peep out of the calf or the cow. They're not walking and bawling and increasing their body temperature. And in our part of the world, in the early summer, it gets pretty warm and the humidity is high. So obviously I want to reduce the opportunity for that stress that might increase the opportunity that they would get sick.
That makes sense. At what age do you usually wean your calves?
I try to wean it between 6 and 8 months. It really just depends on the weather. If we have a run of really, really hot weather, I might delay weaning just a little bit. Or if the group of the weaners that I have, if they're a month to 2 months in age difference in the group, I'd probably go ahead and just wean those together. As you know, some might be 6 months and some might be 8 months, rather than wean individual calves. I like to do them as a group. I think it works better. They'll learn to eat and drink better, and I think they maintain more of a quiet attitude if they have some others with them. I don't ever like to just wean a single one. So I try to stay within about the 6 to 8 month age bracket.
Is there an age when they start to wean naturally?
I think that there is. I think probably 10 to 12 months, in that range. They'll start just gradually decreasing nursing on their mother. Cows start drying up. So eventually they probably would wean themselves if you left them on there long enough.
So for someone that might be new to the cattle business or to raising cattle, what is the benefit of weaning them versus letting them wean or naturally wean themselves?
Well, I think if you leave them with their mother, some things are going to happen that you're probably not going to like. Number one, heifers and bull calves both will have an opportunity to breed or to get bred at a lot younger age than people might think. And longhorns are famous for that because they do, I think, have early puberty and the ability to breed. I actually, unfortunately, had a heifer that didn't get weaned until 9 months and got bred in the pasture without my knowledge prior to weaning. And I never want that to happen again. She actually delivered the calf without a problem, but I just don't ever want to experience that. But I do think you don't want to leave them in there any longer because you may have an as far as an accidental breeding, and that would apply to heifers or to bulls. The second thing is when that calf is getting to that age and it's getting larger in body size and it's going to continue to nurse if its mother's producing milk, I think that you are hurting your cow, maybe setting her back because hopefully at that point in time she's certainly bred back again with another calf, and she needs to be using her nutrition to improve her body condition between calves and to get prepared for the next calf that's going to be born so that she'll have everything she needs and can raise a good calf for out of the next pregnancy. And I think leaving the calf on there too long is hazardous to the cow. And I think it makes it harder sometimes to separate those calves when you've left them with their mothers a long time. Even if they're not nursing a lot, I think that bond just continues to grow and grow. So for me, it works better just to go ahead and get them out of there a little earlier.
So I know earlier you mentioned there's 3 different styles of weaning that you know about or that you've practiced before. What is the weaning process for each one of them?
Well, obviously on the abrupt weaning process, you just take the calf from the cow and move them a distance apart without any warning. I think that process, you'll have a lot of bawling and a lot of calling and walking because the cow is hunting for her calf and the calf is hunting for its mother. And because it's such a sudden process, they don't know if something has happened to the other one. All of a sudden it's there and I mean, it's there one day and all of a sudden it's gone. So I think that actually increases the stress on them. The fence line weaning, if you have good facilities and if you have good fencing, can work for you. I've have done it in the past for years before I started using the quiet weans. I think because the cow and calf can see each other, they're nose to nose, they know where each other are. They'll bawl and walk and stress for 3 or 4 or 5 days at the most. And then after that, they sort of relax and they understand, where they are because they can still see each other and hear each other. The quiet wean, one of the things I like best about it is because of the reduction in the stress, and you don't have any bawling or walking or hunting or, calling to each other. The process on the quiet weans, the manufacturer recommends, like 4 to 7 days that let you leave the nose flap in. I find on my calves, and I don't know if it's because Longhorns have such a strong maternal bond, but I find that 7 to 10 days works a little better for me. But the main thing is you don't hear a peep out of the cow or the calf, either one, using that process. And for me, that just works better, most especially since I don't have great fencing.
Is it easy to put the quiet wean on them, or what is that process like?
Well, one thing about using the quiet weans that you need to understand is it does require the calves, to be put through a chute twice, once to insert the quiet wean and once to remove it. So if you're not in a position that you can dedicate the time to run those calves through twice, then that might not be the best technique for you to use under your circumstances. For me, it works very well. They are a hard plastic and they are smooth. There are some quiet weans there that have sharp, pointy edges. I think the idea being that when the calf tries to nurse, those sharp points would poke their mother in the udder and the cow wouldn't let them nurse. I can't imagine anything worse than taking a cow with a great udder and having a calf poke her with something sharp. So I like the quiet weans because they're smooth and they just fold down over their mouth and it doesn't enable them, to nurse. So for me, that works good. They're not that hard to put in. They are sort of a hard plastic. You do have to twist them to insert them into their nostrils. If it's cold weather, the plastic will be harder, and sometimes it's a little more difficult to twist them, especially if they're brand new. One other benefit of using the quiet weans is they are reusable. So you can use them multiple times on different calves in different weaning seasons or multiple years. If you're doing it in cold weather, I've heard that you can soak them in a bucket of hot water, and that'll make them a little bit more flexible. When I use them, typically it's warm weather, so I don't have a problem with that. But I have heard some folks in cooler weather say that they're kind of stiff and harder to twist. But you put them in a bucket of warm water. You just put them right in. Same thing when you get ready to take them out. You run them through and just kind of squeeze their nose together and pop it right out. It's not difficult at all. I generally do it right by myself.
Do you have trouble with the calves getting them off or getting them stuck on anything?
Every now and then I will have maybe one individual or two individuals out of a pasture that will either catch it on something and pop it out, or sometimes I have had some that have learned that if they can flip the weaning flap up and hold their head at a certain angle, they can still get to the udder and nurse. But that's very rare. I have had it happen a couple of times. And every now and then they will knock them off or catch them on something. And of course, they're made to pull out of their nose. So obviously if they catch it on something, they're not going to be hung somewhere by it. It's going to come on out. The ones I use, which the Quiet Wean brand itself, are bright yellow. The good part about that is if you do lose one in a pasture, it makes it easier to find because they're bright colored. But that's the exception rather than the rule for me. If I wean a pasture of a group of 20 to 25, I might lose one. And every now and then I might have one that learns to nurse with it. But for me, even if there's an odd one out that those things happen to, it's still well worth it.
And do you buy these at your vet? Do you buy them online? Where do you purchase them?
No, I buy them online. There are several cattle supply type companies that I've seen advertise them. I buy them from one particular Valley Vet is who I order mine from. And there's 25 in a pack, and they're about $55 for a packet of 25. And for me, it's worth it. And you can keep using them. I mean, they last forever.
Mm-hmm. How did you first hear about them, Nancy?
Gosh, I don't even remember. Probably read about it somewhere, I would guess, but I don't remember. I've used them now for several years. I don't think I would ever go back to just regular fence line weaning. It's just, for me in my particular situation, it's just well worth it. The stress on the calves, because I worry about that in our heat and humidity, it just is a great, great stress reliever on both the calves and the cows. And that's what it's all about for me.
Love what you're hearing? Be sure to check out our Pickup Truck Confessions.
It's a video series where we hop in the truck or rental car and interview a variety of breeders about what drives their passion for their livestock, how they got started in the breed of their choice, marketing tips, and more.
And now, back to the podcast.
Do you feed the calves or cows, the mama cows, differently before, during, or after the weaning process at all?
Well, I'm not set up to creep feed in the pasture. I know a lot of people do. I think if you're able to creep feed the calves in the pasture prior to weaning, that is an advantage because it makes the transition to feed after weaning just easier because they're already accustomed, to feed. I'm not set up to creep feed in the pasture, but once I bring the calves in and take the quiet weans out, I do start them on feed as a group and start with a very small amount of feed because most of the time they're not going to eat right away. I do find with the quiet weans, they go to feed faster than when I have done fence line feeding. And I think that just all goes back to the difference in the stress and the fact that when you do the fence line weaning, you're weaning them that very day you put them on the fence line. Whereas when you're doing the quiet wean, they've been 7 to 10 days and haven't nursed and they're hungry. And so I find that they do go to feed pretty well, after the weaning, after you take the nose flaps out. But I start them just on a developer type feed, at a very small amount each calf. And then as they get accustomed to eating it and start cleaning it up, then of course I'll increase the amount. But for a few days, it just takes them a little while to sort of, get with the program. Of course, they're accustomed to hay because they've been eating grass and hay before they were weaned, depending on the time of the year. So that's not usually a problem. But it doesn't take them long, 2 or 3 days, and they're usually eating pretty well.
So once they're on their own, is there a certain amount of food and water that you watch for to make sure that they get?
Well, I do think the water is probably as essential or more essential even than the feed. And especially when I'm typically weaning, it's going to be early summer. And because of our temperatures, they've got to stay hydrated. So yes, I will make sure they have ample water and I'll check their water multiple times a day because they're going to be in pens at that point and they're going to be drinking from water troughs. So it's easy to monitor, their water consumption. It's not like most of my pastures that they would come out of are watered by a pond. So sometimes because they're converting from a pasture with pond water to a pen with, we're on public water here, and drinking from a trough, they have to get used to drinking from a trough, but normally they're thirsty enough that they'll go ahead. But I think the water is probably as essential, even as the feed. I don't weigh my feed as far as, determining how much those weaned calves are getting. I just put a certain amount in there for the number of calves that are in there and just watch them. And I try to put individual troughs there so that if there are some that are less assertive, they have an opportunity to eat and they don't have to get in there and fight amongst the more assertive ones. So I put multiple troughs, feed troughs in there. I do think that's important so that they can figure it out, but they don't have to be intimidated, by maybe some of the more assertive ones. But they'll clean, once they start cleaning up the feed, then I let that be my gauge, that I need to increase it.
Are there any differences for breeders who might be weaning in the spring and summer versus the fall and winter?
Well, I think you have some of the same issues, which are health issues. We have summertime pneumonia here because of the heat and humidity. There are people in the wintertime that have pneumonia because of the cold or the snow or the wind or, whatever would come along with their particular weather. So I think the health of your calves and the stress that brings on health issues, even though there might be some differences between what actually occurs during the spring and summer or fall versus fall and winter versus that, the main issue there is the health and the reduction of the stress on the calf. So I don't know that really applies. I think you can have problems, in any of the seasons. It might be brought on by a different kind of weather, but the problems are pretty much going to be the same.
So it sounds like you have a pretty good system down for when you do decide to wean. How long did it take you to get a good system in place?
Well, if I had found out about the quiet weans years ago, I would have started using them. I don't know how long they've been in production, but I wish that I had access to that system long before I found it. It just works very well for me. And it might not work as well for others, just depending on your facilities and how many people you have helping you and the time available you have to devote to weaning. For me, it works great. But for years, I just did fence line weaning, and I made it work. But this, I think, with the quiet weans is much improved over that.
Did you ever try the abrupt, just separating them, that type of weaning?
I actually have done that. And I have a pasture that is far removed from any other pastures and from public roads. And if I do abrupt weaning, because it's hard for me to get into that pasture certain times of the year, the access is not good, and there aren't permanent facilities there to work them. I have to take panels there to set up, to catch them and load them. And then I have to put them on a trailer, haul them to my home ranch, because I only have one chute, work them through the chute, then do everything in reverse, put them back on the trailer, haul them back in there, and then when I get ready to wean them, go back and do it twice again. And the manpower that's needed and the time for that oftentimes is just not available. So on that abrupt weaning, because the fencing and the location of the pasture is more conducive to abrupt weaning, I have done it in that pasture because it works okay in that location. I don't worry about the cows getting out and going and looking for their calves, which they will do. If they can get out and hunt for their calves, they'll do it. I have heard stories of cows traveling miles and miles looking for a calf, that's been taken away from them. But in my particular pasture where I have done that, it is a pasture where I feel like it is safer. They can't get out and get in a public road. And there's just a lot of factors there that it's not as convenient. And I have a smaller number of cows in that particular pasture, but there are occasions sometimes when I use that. There's not a way to do fence line weaning over there, but abrupt weaning there will work okay. The main thing is I don't want them to be able to get out in the road.
Right. Is there a recommended distance that you would say if somebody were to do abrupt weaning, the distance between the mom and the calf?
I think it is crucial that they not be able to see one another or hear one another. Because if the cow can hear the calf or vice versa, I believe they will make every attempt possible to get together, to get back together. And if that means going through a fence and traveling to do it, I believe they'll do it. I just think there's that really strong bond, between the dam and the calf. So if you're going to do abrupt weaning, then my suggestion is make sure that you take the calf far enough away that the cow cannot hear it and certainly cannot see it. And when you do it that way, I think it works actually better. It may sound cruel to do that, but I think it's more cruel when they can hear their calf calling and sounding like they're in distress, but they're not able to get to them, to help them. If they think they need help anyway. But yeah, I would say do it a great move distance.
What advice do you have for those breeders just starting off? Maybe it's their first breeding season and they're getting ready to wean. What sort of insider advice can you share with them?
Well, I think the main thing is you just do some research, talk to a lot of experienced breeders, find out other methods that people have used and what their results have been, and go on a fact-finding mission. Gather as much information as you possibly can from people that you respect and know have some experience, and then use that information based on your operation, your facilities, the type of fencing you have, and how many cattle, how big your operation is. What might work for one person may not work for another. You just have to find what fits your particular situation. And I think the facilities, the location of your pastures, how they're set up, how you get your cattle to and from a chute to work them, how easy is that? Because if you got to put these calves through the chute twice, if you're not set up to do that, then maybe that's not, the best method for you. If you have great fencing, fence line weaning may work good for you. Or if you have hot wire, if that works good for you. I've never had much good experience with hot wire, but some people do, and some people have great fencing. So it really just depends on your individual situation. The other thing I would say about that is just because you wean a calf from its mother, they won't stay weaned. If you keep them apart and then you put them back together, they'll go right back to nursing. And I think some new breeders have been under a misconception about that once you wean the calf, then, once the cow looks like she's dried up, you just put the calf right back with her in the pasture and everything's fine. Well, that's not the case. They will start back nursing for quite an extended period of time. I don't usually put my heifers back in the pasture until they are breeding age or actually have their own first calf. I don't ever put them back in there with their mothers because some of them will start back nursing and develop bad habits, about nursing even once they are mature. And you certainly don't want that.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime, and I'm sure we'll see you down the road.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.